discussion. Question. All right. So if you look at this page,
All right.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Melissa. Can you hear me? Hey, everybody.
Hey,
Good
Missy.
afternoon.
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fine, sweetie. I just see your smile through your no camera.
I'm trying to fix it.
When you
I'm
talk, I
trying.
can just see you smiling. Look, I forgot to send in my excuse that I couldn't be on today. So I was trying to jump on real quick and tell them that I can't be in the meeting today because I got to get out of here and go to a DHA training.
Put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. You're so smart. That's why I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you so
I
much.
can't. Let's see.
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Ms. Hernandez.
All right, perfect. Yeah, Angela, I heard you, so you're all good to go. I'm marking you as excused on the attendance sheet.
Is it possible for you to get closer to the mic? It's kind of you sound distant.
I thought that was my phone. Thank you for that suggestion.
Hey, Ebony.
Miss Angela, I was trying to respond back, but I was on mute. Hi, Miss Angela.
I'm fine. How the baby doing?
She's doing good. She's so big.
How old is she now?
9 months.
It's been that long? Okay.
It's been that long. She'll be a year December the 23rd. She's so sweet.
Okay,
I
that's
think
wonderful.
everybody says that about their baby, right?
Right. But you got to catch up with me. You got 6 more to go.
What? Oh no, ma'am. I'm going on mute now.
Bye, baby. Everybody have a blessed evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Miss Angela.
Bye, Nicole. I haven't seen you and talked to you in a while. All right. Y'all be blessed. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Lloyd. How are you?
Fine, Eliza, how are you today?
Doing well.
To the end of the third quarter of this year.
Can't believe it.
Life keeps moving on.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to give folks a minute to get into the space before we get started.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. How about you?
Doing great.
Good.
All right, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We've not reached quorum yet, but there is a few things we can do right here at the beginning before we have some voting items. Welcome. Good afternoon. Hope everyone is well. I'm calling this September 27th, 2023 HSAC meeting to order. At the top of the meeting, it's been our practice to read the goals, so I'll continue to do that today. Our first goal is to finish the job of ending chronic homelessness, prevent and end veterans homelessness, prevent and end homelessness for families, youth, and children, and set a path to ending all types of homelessness. A few quick housekeeping items. Please check the chat to fill out the sign-in sheet. That will, if you came into the meeting after that was posted, I'm sure Melissa will post that again. So please sign in. And then please stay muted unless you're coming off mute to speak or ask a question. And one way that we can navigate that is by raising your virtual hand if you have a question or a comment. And then I'll call on you. And if you've got a question and you want to put that into the chat rather than raise your hand and speak that question aloud, folks from the community development staff will be monitoring that as well. So those are our housekeeping items. Let's go waiting on quorum. Say something.
We have not yet, but I'll let you know once we have.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to public comment. I did not hear that we had someone sign up. Did we have someone sign up last minute or someone here today that would like to give a public comment?
We did not.
Okay. Well, we'll just wait a few more minutes till we reach quorum.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. How are you, Sharita?
Okay.
Great to hear your voice.
Likewise. Good to see everybody.
Sharita, we're still waiting for quorum, so I'm wondering if we can skip approval of minutes, come back to that, and maybe get the policy and planning quarterly report from you.
Okay. Are we ready? We're ready? You ready to do that? You want to wait a few more minutes?
Let's see. How close are we, Melissa?
We are one off. Very
Okay.
close.
Let's wait one more minute, and then if we don't have quorum, then we'll go to you, Sharita.
Okay.
This is Renee. I hope you don't lose me. I'm driving, but I'm trying to stay logged in.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks for being here. Please drive safely.
All right, we have quorum.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. All right, so we'll do the approval of minutes. Members should have received these minutes via email from the Durham Opening Doors email the morning of September 22nd. We have to approve both the June and August minutes. I'll open the floor for a motion to approve the minutes for our June 2023 HSAC meeting, unless anybody has some edits for us.
I make a motion to approve August and September meeting.
We have
July and August.
we have a motion to approve June and August minutes from Ebony.
This is Avana, second.
Thanks, Avana. We have a second from Avana, and all in favor, please indicate yes in the chat. Against, indicate no, or abstain if as needed.
I'm sorry, I can't write in the chat. This is Renee, yes.
Thanks, Renee. It looks to me that the minutes are approved for both June and August. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move along in our agenda to the policy and planning quarterly report from Sharita. So Sharita, I'll pass it off to you.
Hello, everyone. We have had some very good meetings in policy and planning, and a lot of very good discussions in policy and planning as we work to end homelessness in Durham. So I'm going to give you a review from June, August, and September meetings. In June, we approved the EHG CV standards. We had been out of compliance, and we approved the revisions that were completed by staff. We also voted to classify Dedicated Plus for any of our COC bonus funds in the month of June, and we began to discuss our white flag plans. As Open Table, who had the contract in our in the earlier part of this year, still has some remaining funds to be able to move forward for October 1 to November 1 and to December 31st. In our August meeting, we revisited our white flag discussion because we needed to address how we wanted to prioritize those white flag units. It looks like we'll have 10 units in the current funding and we're waiting on follow-ups from staff regarding the winter early 2024 plan. September, we decided to prioritize 60% of those white flag units for families and 40% for singles, recognizing we can double up the singles units. But also, one of the things we do every month in our policy and planning meetings, we review our current numbers of waitlisted folks. And what I want to just make sure that I reiterate to folks right now is that we are seeing the highest number of families without places to stay that we have ever seen, even during COVID, which I think we may have gotten up at one point to around 32. But as of our September the 11th meeting, we had 56 families reporting homelessness. We had 40 families reporting being at risk of imminent homelessness, which means that within 14 days, they would potentially not have a place to stay. So our family numbers are at a very fast-paced course, and I am getting calls myself by the day of more families on the street. And so one of the things that we talked about in our September meeting was just that, talking about how do we serve families better. We engaged in a very robust conversation with Families Moving Forward and Ms. Tammy Lawrence regarding what their plans are. And what was proposed in that meeting was for us to solicit help from our faith-based community to help us with addressing our family homelessness problem. We had a discussion about a myriad of things that we would like to ask our faith-based community to assist us on. And so I was tasked with reaching out to our biggest conglomerates of faith-based organizations here in Durham County. So as of today, an email went out to the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance, as well as the Durham Congregations in Action, asking for an opportunity for some of us to sit at the table and talk to them about our family homelessness issues here in Durham. Hopefully get some on board to either, if they have properties, to be able to kind of help us have places for people to go, or support any of the families that we're working with until we can get them housed, or possibly pay for hotel stays in addition to what we already have. As far as white flag is concerned, we did approve for prioritization for family permanent supportive housing resources and COC bonuses for families accordingly as well. So our hope is that with us putting priority on families and then us doing these more grassroots problem solving, having these initiatives, that we will be able to help some families get off the street. We are fast approaching our winter months, and we know our numbers go up in the winter. So for us to be at 56 already, it's very scary. Durham Public Schools is already getting taxed. Ebony also shared that their numbers are way up. I don't know if you want to add anything really quickly, Ebony. But that is our update. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Sharita. Yes, our numbers are, we have identified with the state requires us to capture our students who birth to 5. So that number, those students are incorporated in that number too. But right now we have identified 549 students since the first day of school.
So with Ebony providing that number, please go back to your faith-based communities. If they're not connected to DCIA or the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance and they're interested in helping us with our solutions for family homelessness here in Durham, please reach out to myself or Ebony or Colin so that we can get that information together and do some invites when we get the opportunity to meet with our faith-based community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharita. Any questions? Comments?
Yes, this is Nicole Lamb from Coordinate Entry. I just wanted to give an update on the number. So that was September 8th. We have diverted 10 families into the shelter since then. And we've diverted, so we're down to 41 families unsheltered. And we diverted up to 6 families with travel diversion to have them stay at families, our friends' houses until they got back on their feet outside of North Carolina.
Okay, thank you.
So, Nicole, real quick, that updated number then is 41 families?
41 unsheltered, and there's 45 at risk.
Got
And
it.
that was as this morning, checking the report.
Thanks for that update.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or follow-ups? All right, thank you again for that important report and for uplifting those numbers and a call to action to the group. We're going to move to the next item on our agenda, which is an HSAC approval needed item about the HSAC stipend, and Colin will share more with us.
Good afternoon. So the HSAC stipend, this is not a stipend for HSAC members. This is a small pool of funds that the HSAC is able to determine how to use. The city has allocated $1,000 for us to use during this fiscal year. Last year, there was $1,000. We were not made aware of it until it was very late to plan. So the executive committee elected to use last year's funding to purchase books related to Housing First for all HSAC members. So we have these books that have been ordered. They're sitting in my office ready to be distributed, and wanted to start thinking through how the HSAC may like to spend that $1,000 this year. Some of the ideas that have been kicked around was trying to do an in-person meeting somewhere and maybe have food and distribute the books at that location, since it's been a few years since we've all been together in a nice place, in a space for us to meet. That's one option. Just looking for other ideas on what to do with it. The funds do need to be used for the furtherance of the HSAC. So it's not like we can take it and donate it to a nonprofit to help subsidize housing or something along those lines. So just something to think about. We'll probably send out a questionnaire. If you have some ideas, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll jot them down so that we can kind of put something together to make sure we plan and get these spent in a timely manner. That's it.
So, Colin, it sounds like maybe this is not an approval yet. Okay,
Not
got it.
approval yet. We want to make sure we get thoughts on what everybody wants to do before we make a final decision on things.
Sure, that makes sense. Any additional questions for Colin? Thoughts that you would prefer to share with the group?
Does that mean that we need to discuss what we want to do, or with, in regards to whether we're going to have a get together or whatever, or is it going to be like a poll or something that's going to go out that we'll get later to make a decision?
So it could be both, Sharita. It could be hey, if people have ideas, throw them in the chat. Then we'd create a poll and send it out and do a vote. Majority wins. If only one idea comes up, then we'll go with that idea, assuming it fits within the budget. Unfortunately, we're not able to take everybody to like the Bahamas for a vacation. It's $1,000. So we were able to buy books for everybody last year. $1,000 when you spread it out over the HSAC, it's enough money that you can do something cool with it. It's just a matter of what's the best use of the funds and what would help the HSAC, or what would the HSAC like to do.
Colin, I can make it easy for you. Just deposit the $1,000 in my bank account. That would be great.
Can't do that, unfortunately.
I see a question in the chat. Could funds be used to solicit volunteers of people experiencing homelessness to participate in focus groups to help further identify gaps in our current system?
That came up, Ricky. It's a great question. That's something that we kind of talked about. And I don't know the answer to it because there's stipends in other places. I'm not sure we'd be able to use this pool of funds as a stipend from the city. It gets a little tricky doing that kind of thing.
For clarification, it does say when we receive the funds from the city clerk's office with the note, it does say that it needs to be used on the HSAC specifically. And then it lists like options, like you could do either training for the HSAC or some other kind of event that involves the full membership. So it does need to be spent on the HSAC as a group.
I'll just add, I can't remember if Colin shared this with the idea around gathering the group around food. We also thought that might be an idea that could work to pass out the books that were purchased for the group from last year. Some other thoughts that exec team shared were thinking about some sort of paper that's like some sort of infographic that we can pass out beyond our worlds here in this meeting. How are we kind of spreading awareness, and what could that look like? And what came up was kind of similar to those cards that Housing for New Hope has, but how might there be an opportunity to learn as a group, but then also share what we're learning with others? And might there be something that we could have created?
Along the same lines, I know we also talked, the exec committee also talked about, having like a brief training / orientation to the HSAC with resource packets. We have a lot of new members in the HSAC just in the last year even. So it would definitely be nice to have an orientation where we can have everyone together. So I know that was one of the things that we talked about, and potentially putting together a resource packet for someone who may be new to working within a COC, because not everyone on the HSAC interacts with the COC on a daily basis. So that was another conversation that we had, was allowing some kind of resource guide to know the different ways that you can participate in the COC.
I see another question in the chat. What about spending funds for affirmative fair marketing campaigns?
I meant to type affirmatively furthering fair marketing.
Thank you.
Anthony knows what I'm talking about.
He sure does. This just a quick note, the affirmative marketing is something that HUD asks as a part of our application process, and there are additional points available. So it's just another alternative that we have to think about over the coming year.
So it sounds like there are a couple ideas shared today. If you have others and want to put them in the chat throughout the meeting, those will be collected. And then Colin, it sounds like there'll be some sort of email or at our next meeting, an announcement with a poll of sorts so that we can vote as a group on those ideas. All right. We'll move to our next item. This is attendance requirements for HSAC and some committees. It's just informational only. And just a brief reminder that we do have an attendance requirement with our committees and our HSAC group. We get these wonderful emails before our meetings, and in those emails where you can sign up for the Zoom is also a link where you can be reminded that if you can't make it to the meeting, you can go ahead and fill out the excused absence form. I want to note that you do need to fill that out 24 hours in advance of the meeting for it to count as an excused absence. So if you know you're not going to be able to make it, please let us know. It's important so that we'll know that we are meeting quorum. And then if a member is missing more than two unexcused, has two unexcused absences, you'll receive a check-in call. First and foremost, we want to make sure you're okay, but also we want to ensure that we are attending more meetings that we're missing. And that's also something that we do on exec team. So we're looking at attendance kind of in these intervals throughout the year to make sure that we are staying above 50%. So just a reminder that that link does come in the email, and that's a good reminder a couple of days before the meeting, if you're not able to make it, to go ahead and fill that out. And then also the policy and procedures around excused absences do come in the calendar invites, but will also be available on our website that Melissa will be sharing more with us about. So any questions, comments about our attendance requirements? Melissa, that what you just sent through, it didn't come linked for me. I'm not sure if it came linked for others, but I'm going to pass it off to you anyway. Next, we have our COC website changes. On your agenda, you'll see that I'm listed as the presenter. We'll do an updated agenda that will be posted publicly, that will have an edit. That is supposed to be Melissa, who's doing that presentation for us. So I'll pass it off to her.
Thank you, Eliza. Hello, everyone. Just give me a second to get my screen share. Oh, can you guys hear me better, by the way? I joined from my phone, so hopefully you guys can hear.
Can hear you great.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me share. All right. So I know we sent an email to our full COC several months ago, just letting you know that the old Durham COC website was no longer going to be used or updated on a regular basis. And we've actually migrated the Durham COC page over to the City of Durham's website. That old website will no longer be available starting in October. So we wanted to make sure that we did a formal reminder in HSAC so that you guys are fully aware of the fact that information has migrated over to the City of Durham website. The old website is right here. So we will be saying goodbye to this. And instead, we'll be using the City of Durham's website. I did want to show how you would find the COC page if you're joining from the main durhamnc.gov. So I am going to put this in the chat at the end, just so you guys can have access to the website in this meeting as well. But you would go to durhamnc.gov, click on departments, and you'll see community development. And once you click on community development, our COC page is all the way at the bottom. And here you should be able to access all of the information that was available on the old COC webpage. We are planning on making some updates to this website. There is some outdated information that we are already aware of. For example, our HSAC page needs to be updated. So there are some names and we have some new members who need to be added to the page. So there are several things on the webpage that we do know need to be updated. So part of the reason why we wanted to have this meeting during HSAC is because we're going to be requesting feedback in the next week or so. So we're going to send out a formal survey as a wrap up to our full HSAC meeting, and you'll get all of the other documents and presentations from today as well. But I will be asking for feedback. So I wanted you guys to be able to see the website, kind of see how it functions. And then I would really appreciate that you respond to that survey that we send in an email to let us know if there's additional feedback that you have. If you notice that the website is hard to navigate at all, or if there's anything that doesn't make sense, or you notice a typo, anything like that, we welcome all of that feedback. Now, we did talk about the attendance policy and the excused absence policy. So just to make it really easy, I want to be able to show you an example of how to find that. So on the tabs, there's a COC policies, procedures, and standards. And when you click on that, it'll bring you to all of our governing documents. So our HSAC governance charter, the interlocal agreements, and even the governance board charter. So it does show you all of those things. I wanted all of you to be able to see that because if you're new to the HSAC, these are definitely all things you'll want to review at some point. If you go to our HSAC page and then click on structure and process, this is where you'll find all of the different policies that have to do with how we became a COC and what's the structure of that, as well as the excused absence policy, and the attendance tracking report is also on this page. Now, I did ask you or let you guys know that there are some corrections that need to be made on our website. One of the first ones is that our leadership page is going to have to be updated. So this is one of the pages that I would really like you guys to focus in on when I ask for feedback on the website, because this is a page that definitely needs some major updates. So we will take a look at this again a little bit later too in the agenda when we talk about contact information. So that's the new website. I'm not going to go into every single page because that would take an hour to go through each page and all of the links on it. But I did want to open it up for any questions or any initial feedback that any of you might have about the website change.
Sharita, go ahead.
While I understand the need to change it, the beauty of the other site was the ease of being able to find information. And so when I'm thinking about our clients, the people we're serving, when I'm thinking about people new to the area, I think the current way this new way, it's gonna be a little bit more complicated to find us. I don't know if there's a way we can have smart phrases that people can type in that'll get them here quicker, so they don't have to know to click, go to city government, go down to the end of the sidebar, those kinds of things. I think that we just need to take that into consideration, because sometimes in our need to make things more formalized and structured and orderly, we kind of push the people out. We need to get the message. We make it harder for them to get information. So if there's any way that we can simplify it so that access to the information can come up easier, I think that would be greatly appreciated and beneficial for our consumers.
Sharita, that's extremely important. I thank you for your comment, because that is always important, that our clients have access, that our providers have access. I will say, if you were to Google Durham COC right now, this webpage comes up first. So there have been some changes made for Google keywords, where this website should be the one that's coming up. Also, I think like homeless services, Durham, this also pops up. So there are some key phrases that are already attached to the website. So that if someone just Googles and they don't necessarily know to go to durhamnc.gov, they'll still be able to get this website first. I can check in with our TS support and see if there are other options for making it easily accessible. But as far as I know, they do already have some key phrases that have to do with homeless services and COC to make it easy to find, even if you don't know the exact web address.
Thanks, Melissa. Great question, Sharita. Melissa, just as a follow-up, I'm curious, do we have any of the data from the old website to be able to know what were the top 5 key phrases that would send people to the old website?
The top one is Durham COC. So that was the first one that I gave to TS when we first migrated over. And then the second was homeless Durham. And all of those keywords are included in the current website. So the top phrases that we know of that people use to access our website are the ones that are associated with this one. I think one of the things though is that I do want, while I want it to make it easy for people to access this if they're Googling the website, I also want it to be easy to understand if you're visiting the website. The COC's website right now on the Durham City website looks very different from our old website. So that is another thing that I want you guys to take a look at when you have a moment, because this looks very different. It's laid out very differently than our old website is. So there's 2 different ways that I interpret access, and one of them is getting onto the website, and then the other is like the ability to access the information. So if you guys can take a look at both, not necessarily something we have to discuss today, but when we do submit that survey for feedback, I'd really appreciate additional feedback, because we are talking about and looking into how we change this and simplify it for people.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. It's clear you've put a lot of thought into this. Any other questions?
I do have one more thing. Oh, sorry. Yes.
No, go ahead.
But this is just one thing that is not on the new website, and I wanted to share during this meeting because it's going to go out as an email later as well, is that there used to be a sign up to join the COC listserv. It's going to be added to this webpage, but I wanted to make sure everyone on here has access to the new listserv request. Let me send it here. So it's in the chat right now, and this is for you to sign up for the COC listserv. If you already have access to the COC listserv and you're already getting those emails regularly, you don't need to sign up again. But definitely if you have employees who interact with the COC in different ways, or other partners that you want to be able to access any COC information, this is the link that they would use to sign up for the listserv.
Russ, did you have a question about what was just the listserv piece before we move on to Heidi?
Yeah, just very quickly. I mean, I'm curious if we're doing some updating on the listserv, is this a chance to just start clean? I ask because sometimes if one of us sends things out, I think last time I got 50 bounce backs because there's so many old, it's almost as intense as the said listserv in terms of inactive emails on there. I don't know if this is a chance to clean that up so that, I don't know if once a year we can start fresh and add people back on, but that may be too complex, but I think there's a lot of inactive folks on there.
Thanks, Russ, for putting that out. Sounds like we can have some more conversations. Heidi?
Yes, thanks. Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of benefit to making these changes that you highlighted for us, Melissa. I just went to the website and navigated through it myself, and it feels user-friendly, especially for people in the community who are trying to learn more about how they might help with service provision. I think Sharita makes a great point about those who actually are looking for services. And I noticed that there is a link for entry point, but it took a couple of clicks to get to it. I wonder if, if that's something we would want to consider, is trying to make that more front and center for those seeking services. I also ended up after a couple of clicks at street outreach, and if you're experiencing homelessness and you're trying to, or someone who is, you're reach, that was also a link that I eventually landed on a website where it looked like it could be very useful for people seeking help. So I didn't know whether that might be something we want to look into. Just something for you all to think about.
I took some
agree
notes.
with that,
I am
'cause I
taking
was-
notes as all of you talk. So this is really good feedback.
Okay.
I was looking at the same thing, Melissa. I was trying to figure out how a client would get, how on the Durham CLC page, that little blurb about entry point is like the first thing you see on the old page. Like, it's not on this one. And I was trying to figure out how a person would find that looking at the sidebar. So maybe having a tab saying, if you need help or something like that, and then you click on that, and then the person, and then those things kind of be like right up front, up top, for people to be able to access that information quickly.
These are really great suggestions. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And for those of us that are listening, I'm not on the website searching, but it definitely gives me an added lens to look through it later. And when Melissa sends that, we can continue to comb through and offer other suggestions. So be sure to do that. Any other questions for Melissa? All right. Thank you so much, Melissa, for that. We look forward to getting the link. We're going to move on to public contact information for HSAC membership. This is informational only. So as a part of this website refresh and as a part of being a public committee, we're required to post the names and contact information of our membership. And because we've been meeting online, lots of folks have contact information that may be personal and rather than their work email addresses. So there's an opportunity to just be really clear by filling out a form to say, this is the contact information that you can reach me at. This is for HSAC members. And I believe that this will be posted on the website. So we will, there it is, it's in the chat. So it takes about 2 seconds to fill out. You're welcome to do it now. Please remember to do so, as we need to comply with that requirement to have our names and contact information on the website. Any questions about that? All right, we'll move on to the presentation of the COC consolidated application. Lloyd Schmeidler will present that to us. This is an informational only item.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lloyd Schmeider with the Community Development Department. I'm going to attempt to share my screen and go through a few slides regarding this year's COC consolidated application. All right. Eliza, would you confirm you can see my screen?
I can see it, yes.
Very good, thank you. A brief overview of the funding opportunity that we have in the 2023 COC competition. Annual renewal of funding for projects that were funded last year amounts to $1,886,565. 93% of that is in tier 1. The remainder of 132,000 is in tier 2 and at risk of being lost if our collaborative application does not score well enough. We also have opportunities to apply for a COC bonus as well as a domestic violence bonus in the amounts listed. And the COC planning grant is a non-competitive grant that we will receive from HUD for having submitted a application that meets thresholds. So altogether, total funding was 2.3555 million. HUD uses a lot of terms, and so I just wanted to briefly on this slide recall the three parts to the consolidated application: the collaborative application, the priority listings, and the project applications. And so these three portions of the consolidated application all work together, and they're all submitted in HUD's online web portal called eSNAPS, for the Electronic Special Needs Assistance Programs website. We spend most of the time working through the collaborative application. I was looking for a real definition of what the collaborative application is, and the quote on the top of this slide is the nearest I could find in this year's Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO, that kind of describes the collaborative application. It doesn't use the term. Nowhere in the NOFO do we have the term collaborative application, but HUD frequently references the collaborative applicant must provide information about the COC planning body, the governance structure, overall performance, and the strategic planning process. And that is really what what we call the collaborative application attempts to provide to HUD, is this information to address these various aspects of what the COC does. In eSNAPS, there's 4 numbered sections that are given here. HUD uses these sections, I think, to also guide the scoring of the collaborative application. The scoring of collaborative applications is well documented, well described, down to the specific point value of individual questions on that are in the collaborative application. We have pretty good understanding of how much each section of the collaborative application, and sometimes even down to the question, how much each question is going to be worth. It is a 200-point scale, as it was in 2022. HUD changes from time to time the value of the collaborative application, but in the 2023 collaborative application is worth 200 points. The major sections, I would say, are questions 1 and 2, which we spent a lot of time on. Very little information really under section 3, which does address whether we're applying for leveraging of housing and healthcare, and a few other minor items. I think one reference is whether we're applying for whether we use category 3 of homelessness, which concerns homelessness under other definitions besides HUD. Then there's when COCs apply for a domestic violence bonus, that is referenced in section 4, and there's several additional questions that the COC on the collaborative application has to describe about how well the COC and the domestic violence bonus project organization are working to address domestic violence. And then also under section 4 is a whole series of attachments. They actually make up the bulk of the total pages devoted to the collaborative application, which has been posted to the COC website that you can enjoy reading at your leisure. I'm going to talk briefly about the collaborative application preparation process. Really am grateful for members on this call from the HSAC and others from the COC membership and the community that assisted with the preparation of the collaborative application. This year it is with the attachments that are about 40 pages, I think. The collaborative application itself, I think, is about 80 pages. So lots of information being provided to HUD. And so we had 5 virtual preparation sessions held every other week between July 28th and September 22nd. We got, in addition to those sessions, we reached out via email, sometimes phone calls, often via email to specific community partners, Durham Housing Authority, I'm not sure she's on the call, but Colleen Herbert at NCCU was invited to send us input about the gaps analysis that she was spearheading a subcommittee of policy and planning that worked on that for some time. Other community partners as well. Volunteers of America helped with questions related to Entry Point Durham and our coordinated entry system. Certainly, we work closely as well with Families Moving Forward on the domestic violence bonus questions under Section 4. So really very grateful for the various community partners that provided input and guidance around specific questions. Lead agency staff, myself, I was the lead writer, but gratefully I had great support this year from our staff in community development, Anthony Henderson, Jeffrey Rawlings, other lead agency staff as well. Colin Davis, our manager, provided some oversight as well, but really had great assistance. Melissa, I think, did a read through to make sure we were using good English, and we're grateful for everybody's contributions to that. Also want to mention in parentheses that at the same time as we were working kind of feverishly on the collaborative application, we were also working with a subcommittee of performance management to evaluate and rank the renewal project applications themselves, and 5 new project applications that we had to review and decide which of those would be recommended for funding. So that process was happening at the same time as we were working on the collaborative application. And then in the last week or so, we needed to post the collaborative application and our priority listings online. The HSAC was asked over the I'm not sure Melissa can review the schedule for me. I think we sent out a request for a review and the HSAC's approval of the collaborative application and the priority listings either late last week, Thursday or Friday, and gave the HSAC until this past Monday to review and approve the collaborative application and the priority listings. We appreciate people's timely responses to that email poll, and with that we were able to have an approved collaborative application and priority listings to submit to HUD. And Colin gave me the privilege of clicking the submit button in eSnaps yesterday to complete the total application process. A couple slides about strengths and weaknesses of the collaborative application. Really grateful to Anthony Henderson for taking the lead in developing a lived experience advisors work group over the last couple of months that we do envision continuing to expand, getting more input from people with lived experience to provide guidance to policy and planning and to the COC leadership as a whole. And may not have time to talk about it today, but potentially in coming meetings we may talk more about it. We were also able to work with community partners at Duke, the School of Nursing, at Alliance Health, at CASA, and within the department to develop healthcare leverage commitments and housing leverage commitments for both the permanent supportive housing bonus project that's being recommended for funding, as well as the domestic violence bonus project. And one other strength is that we did, though home the unsheltered homelessness increased by about 10% between 2022 and the 2023 point in time count. In January, the overall homeless point in time count did decrease from 2022 to 2023, as noted. Some weaknesses that will cost us points when HUD scores the collaborative application. The decline of rapid rehousing units and beds, a substantial decline on the point in time count of not only on the night of the point in time count do we count the numbers of people experiencing homelessness on that one night, but we also, based on that one night, report to HUD the number of emergency shelter beds, rapid rehousing beds, permanent supportive housing beds and units, and other permanent housing that's dedicated for occupancy by homeless people or formerly homeless people. And we saw a substantial decline in rapid rehousing units and beds between 2022 and 2023. Other permanent housing is a reporting category of housing that's dedicated for use by homeless people. This is largely emergency housing vouchers and HUD-VASH voucher units that are managed through our partners at Durham Housing Authority, but currently those units are not, and beds are not using the homeless management information system. We also was a challenge for us. Hopefully we can, moving forward, can do better to regularly engage youth and youth serving organizations in the 2023 point in time count. Should have done better in that, and I think I can take some responsibility for not working more closely with Housing for New Hope to ensure that we were doing that. And then probably the biggest area of concern or weakness is simply a lack of improvement on HUD system performance measures. I think we did a pretty good job with our narrative in terms of our strategies to work on system performance measures, but HUD also looks at our actual system performance measures as that is reported in the homelessness data exchange, and a lot of our system performance measures did not either showed not only were they flat, but they showed actually deterioration in our overall performance. So that's a concern. So then briefly, the priority listings. This is basically these bullet points are how the priority listings within eSNAPS are structured, or the divisions within the eSNAPS application. So you have a form for showing projects that may have been reallocated. We didn't have any projects recommended for reallocation in 2023. And there's a section for new projects, and we do have 2 recommended projects that ranked, and we had 3 project applications in eSNAPS that were not recommended for funding. And the renewal projects are listed on a separate page. The planning project is listed on a separate page. YHDP stands for Youth Homeless Demonstration Projects, Youth Homeless Demonstration Program Projects, and we don't have that category of funding in the Durham COC either, but it is within the priority listing. So kind of just orienting you to how the priority listings in eSNAPS are organized. And then finally, there's a funding summary, and within the funding summary, there's an attachment that is a certificate of consistency with the community's consolidated plan that our Department Director, Reginald J. Johnson, signs on behalf of all of the projects that are recommended for funding. This slide is a brief slide showing the project application recommendations that we've made and the percentage breakdown of how much of the available $2,355,000 was devoted to that particular funding category. So a small amount for HMIS implementation, nearly half for permanent supportive housing projects, slightly over half of the available funding this year is being recommended for rapid rehousing projects, and then again, the COC planning grant. Hopefully that was a helpful brief overview of this year's COC consolidated application. Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to you.
Thanks, Lloyd. Were you able to see the question in the chat?
I did not, so.
So I'll read it. Is that decline in rapid rehousing units beds common among COCs since COVID money has dried up?
It's a great question. I don't know that we have an answer to that. I don't know if Colin or anybody else on the team would want to entertain a response to that question. Again, I've not seen the inventory of other comparable COCs or other statewide COCs, and I just don't have that information at this point.
Looking at our ESG, all that COVID money that we had, we ended up actually not helping that many more people in our continuum of care. We just lost landlords. So that's where our biggest dip is. And across the country, it's just getting harder and harder to find units that qualify on HUD's fair market rent that ESG requires you to land on. So that's the big piece. But I can't speak specifically as this is a nationwide issue. The nationwide issue is housing prices are out of control. The fair market rents are lower, but there aren't enough units that are vacant to be rented at those price points.
Well, as I do see Ricky's question in the chat regarding what performance measures are declining. Keep my overhead light on in my office. I could share some information. I did look at those rapid rehousing beds, briefly on follow up on that. Rapid rehousing beds declined from 182 beds in 2022 to just 92 beds in 2023. Hopefully that'll go back up in coming years. The average length of time homeless increased from 93 to 95 days, and as that was happening, the median length of time homeless decreased from 62 to 46 days. So that really suggests that there were a significant number of people staying in the system as homeless for extended periods of time. The average length of time homeless prior to housing increased from 582 days to 620 days, again suggesting that the system, a lot of people coming into the system are homeless for significant periods of time before they actually get through entry point. A positive measure, I'll highlight that, is that our returns to homelessness were only 9% in the reporting year. That is a 3-year look back period. So it goes back 3 years in terms of the people that exited, say 3 years ago, or more than 2 years ago, what percentage of them returned to homelessness within the following 2-year period. So generally we're doing pretty good with returns to homelessness. I think the national average in that area is probably 15 to 20%. I think there's also that would suggest that maybe with some households we're providing perhaps a little more assistance than is actually needed. Our COC funded projects are really struggling with employment and income growth for stayers in those projects. Only 8% of stayers reported earned income. I think HUD's goal is 20%. Only 36% had increases in total income. First-time homelessness, which I think is a good thing, as I've shared before. In both years, first-time homelessness was right at 78% of the people seeking assistance in the COC. permanent housing stability of people in rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing was at 99%. We had 40% exits to permanent housing destinations from our emergency shelters in our system. Street outreach placement, I think, is very, very positive. I don't know how HUD scores that, but I think it scores well. Our system performance measures were like 24% of exits from street outreach were to a positive housing destination.
Sharita, is what you put in the chat what you were hoping to say with your hand raised?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So are we nervous of the fact that half of our current recommended funding is being dedicated to rapid rehousing efforts when we know we don't have enough units that meet price point?
I'm not sure who that question is directed to.
Either you or Colin. I'm just curious. I mean, you just shared that, and then we talked about referee housing units drying up, and then Colin, you followed up with units not meeting price point, and we have all this money dedicated to rapid rehousing. So what are we gonna do?
I think at this point, I'm not as nervous as I would have been 2 months ago. The HUD just released their fair market rents for the Durham area, and the fair market rents jumped 25% on like about 25% from last year to this year, which means we've got a whole new set of units that are accessible now. Last year, from October to September, the fair market rent was $13.15 for a 2-bedroom unit. Starting October 1 of 2023, the fair market rent will be $16.35, if I remember correctly. And keep in mind that includes a utility allowance. Are there still enough units that a household could go rent for $1,300 or $1,400? No, but there's more units in that $1,300 to $1,400 price point than there are in the $900 to $1,100 price point. The piece that I'm more scared about is rapid rehousing is a short to medium term investment. And if people making $15 an hour can't afford $900 to $1,100 a month, we're going to have a bigger hill to climb when they've got to figure out how to afford $1,300 to $1,400 a month rents. We also have the landlord engagement contract with Housing for New Hope that is out doing their thing to try and recruit and retain more. And it's slow to come online, but there are a lot of properties under construction now that are funded with tax credits that will sort of help folks who are at that 30% AMI. Granted, we have most of the folks in our homeless system are not at 30% AMI. So that's going to be the challenge, is how to help those folks. But if we can at least do something, I'm hopeful. Is it a little scary? Sure, it's always a little bit scary because the need exceeds the resources that are available. But I think we're in a little bit of a better position this year than we were last year at this time.
Can I respond, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Please.
Okay. I got to do a better job of that, not just opening my mouth and talking. I'm sorry, y'all, if I done that today. So I it's great that the fair market rents have gone up. I think the problem that we have had in our system historically is we haven't done a really good job on increasing families or individuals' incomes so that when short-term subsidies go away, they actually can stay in housing. And so my concern is that piece. What do we need to do as a continuum, especially when we have this huge, half of our funding go?
Nope, you cut out Sharita.
goes away, they can actually afford to stay housed. What are we gonna do as a continuum to help people get their income in a upward trajectory over that time?
Sharita, you're cutting in and out. So we can't hear you again. Oh, seems that Sharita will join us again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm at work, so I don't know what's happening. So I don't know how much you heard. We haven't done well in increasing our, the folks we're working with, we haven't done well with increasing incomes. So I worry still about what we're gonna do when the rapid rehousing dollars dry up, and people are still in housing and their income is not high enough. So what do we do in the meantime when we know that half of
You've cut out again.
So let me take a step at answering. I think I understand that the gist of the question is, what are we going to do for folks who are struggling to get their incomes up to meet the challenge of those rents? The first thing that we have done is changed our prioritization process for rapid rehousing. For a few years, rapid rehousing was often being used for people who, best case scenario, their income would maybe be a disability income of maybe $900 a month. And you're not going to sustain anything on that $900 a month in a rapid rehousing program. And the hope would be, oh, well, at $900 a month, then they can go to public housing or they'll get a voucher. Well, public housing and vouchers aren't always available. So over the last year, Policy and Planning has recommended some changes based on the data. So we're better aligning rapid rehousing for households that only would need that short to medium term touch. We're in the process of redesigning our referral tools and our prioritization tool. And part of this criteria will be, if you're going to go to rapid rehousing, you have to have a plan. And you can't just make up the plan once you're in rapid rehousing. It's sort of, okay, I want to be engaged. I want to go to rapid rehousing. Here's what I need to get into the unit. Here's what I need to do over this time to get my income there. So we're really trying at the lead agency level, trying to get the system refocused on having conversations about housing and how to sustain and maintain housing at all levels, from street outreach to entry point to emergency shelter, and that all of these would be able to build on each other. So somebody in street outreach would be able to come in with, oh, well, I kind of came up with a tentative budget, but I don't have a job yet. Well, now they're in emergency shelter. Now it's like, hey, I've got a tentative budget. Now I know I need to find a job that kind of lines up with this kind of income, or a combination of jobs that does this. Now, what's the next step? What's the next step? That's kind of how we're trying to do it. Is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. But that's sort of the vision and the goal that we have to try and help solve for these challenges.
Thanks, Colin. Lloyd, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to add a clarification regarding the funding and the distribution between rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, and that is to say that those percentages were based on the total amount of funding of the $2,355,000. Just a gentle reminder that our tier 1 amount is $1,754,505. So we've got a substantial amount that is going to be in tier 2. The planning grant of $106,610 is pretty much assured. So the funding that's more or less assured to us is coming in at $1,860,000. Everything above that is going to be in tier 2. The domestic violence bonus project is really only applicable to the domestic violence bonus competition. So they really have one shot at that. But if we score well on a collaborative application, we will get get one or both of the two new tier 2 projects funded, but we'll see.
Thanks, Lloyd. Russ?
Just a quick, I'm not sure if this is a question or comment, but going back to the piece around that Colin mentioned of new properties being brought online, I'm wondering when we could, as a group, have an update on when the properties are being brought online. At this point, everything's in pipeline, other than some of the DHA properties. And I know I was at the groundbreaking for the Hardy Street project, and H&H is a partner in that, in terms of the referrals. And so we know there's 30% units in there, but it may really be helpful for us, one, for future applications, when we can say these units are being set aside and they're coming, but also for us to start mapping that relative to some of these rapid rehousing funds that are coming through. I think we all know they're out there. I don't know that we know exactly. I heard an actual number at the Hardy Street one, Hardy Street groundbreaking. So we may want to, I don't know if Reginald or who the right person is to come back with solid numbers about the COC related portions of these projects.
A great point, Russ. Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing another question. I want to make sure we don't skip over it. For the new prioritization for permanent housing projects, is the household's ability to increase income considered for the BNL process?
So I responded in the chat. We
Okay.
we are working on trying to figure out housing plans. And part of a housing plan is, what is your plan to be able to pay the rent when the funds end? And, it has to be somewhat of a reasonable plan. It can't be a, I'm going to win the lottery next month and I'll be fine. That's not really a reasonable housing sustainability plan. It can be a plan B or a plan C, but there should be something that, oh, I've got a job, or I will have a job, or I'll take on a second job. Shared housing, to Sharita's next question, is with the disability is great. Unless there's a voucher, somebody who only has a disability income is never going to be able to afford renting anything in Durham except for a bedroom in a house, like shared living. And unless we are really get focused on shared housing and helping to change the mindsets of folks who want to get into housing and realize that shared housing is not a horrible thing. I think a lot of us have been in shared housing at some point, in dorms or roommates, and we've had to do it at various levels. And people experiencing homelessness to exit homelessness may need to also do some shared housing to make the cost of rent affordable. And without doing that, when rents go up, it's nearly impossible. I mean, shared housing is really the only way that works as rents start getting out of reach. And coming from the Northern Virginia, DC area, where right now we're at $1,613 or $1,635 for a 2-bedroom, the DC fair market rent for a 2-bedroom is over $2,000. And you're lucky if you can find a place to rent for $2,000. You're probably looking at an actual lease amount in the $2,200 to $2,400 a month range. So shared housing is really the only way you can do it in expensive housing markets.
Thanks, Colin. And thanks for pointing out you had answered. I hadn't scrolled down. Well, thank you for that robust conversation, everybody. I'm going to do a time check. It's 4:18. Colin, we had said for this last informational only item that we needed 20 minutes. How are you feeling about doing some of it, going through it, moving on to the next?
It's not that long. I think I could probably knock it out pretty quickly. I won't go over every little detail number. I'll go over some of the highlights, and we can send it out as I go. If people want to ask questions, you're welcome to do so, but we can get through it pretty quickly if you'd like.
Yes, please go ahead.
You got it. Give me 1 second. All right. So every year we do need to do an annual coordinated entry evaluation. So this is not the full coordinated entry evaluation. This is just some high level interesting pieces of it that I wanted to share with the group, with the HSAC, and the full version is a Word document that we have to submit to the state as part of our state ESG application. So that's where this kind of comes from. So wanted to start about, well, why do we do this coordinated entry evaluation? Because I know the HSAC is used to getting tons and tons of reports and tons of numbers, and it's like, great, we hear all these numbers, who cares? Except they mean something, but what do they mean and why? So this particular evaluation helps us to get an idea of how many people are reaching out to the continuum of care for assistance. Because this is the only way we can get a true universe of everybody who needs help, not just the people who are actually served in emergency shelter and street outreach. There are a lot of people who call coordinated entry and they're never able to get help because there's never space. So this helps us give us a better universe of numbers. It also helps us figure out gaps in the system and figuring out how many new slots became available during a year for rapid rehousing and PSH. And it also can help us get some insight on our system performance and equity of resources. HUD has been very pushing lately a lot of looking at the systems and ensuring racial equity for housing outcomes. And I will say, spoiler alert, Durham is doing an incredibly good job on the equity side of the equation. So looking at this, the left-hand column is going to be the 21 to 22 numbers and the 22 to 23 numbers. So you'll see that total numbers of persons served dropped from 3,400 to 3,382. Not a huge drop, but a tiny drop of people who were calling. The thing I find interesting here is the number of children under the age of 18 did jump by almost 10%. And we did have, at the end of the year, 345 people were still in our coordinated entry system waiting for assistance, and 3,037 people were able to exit the coordinated entry system. This is from entry point. They were able to exit to either permanent housing or disappeared on us or to permanent housing. We'll talk about permanent housing exits in a little bit. Now, if we look at our subpopulations, out of all those 3,000 people who called, we saw a decrease in the number of veterans who were seeking assistance, but we did see an increase in the number of chronically homeless. Some of that increase in the chronically homeless is due to policies that we had in place that to get referred to rapid rehousing or PSH or a lot of other places, length of time being homeless was one of the criteria. And as we know, the longer you're experiencing homelessness, often more difficult it is to move out of homelessness. So we have made adjustments in the policies to try and work with first-time homeless as well as those who are chronically homeless and try and work from both ends of the spectrum. Domestic violence. We have seen a big jump in domestic violence related calls from 188 to 305. And those are people who have a history of domestic violence. And then from the fleeing domestic violence, a little bit more than doubling the number of people who are actively reporting they were fleeing an intimate partner violence situation. So that is something that we're in the process of starting to work with DCRC now that they've got a new executive director, Damian Talley, and I've met and are planning to have some meetings to talk about how we can tie the coordinated entry system and the DV system together to try and help more of these folks who are trying to flee domestic violence. Demographics. This is kind of this is an interesting piece where we have, as the city of Durham is, and county of Durham is not 76%, is not made up of 76% of the population is not Black or African American. So you'll see people who identify as Black, African American, or African have a disproportionately high number of people in the homeless system, which we have known for years, that number has stayed relatively constant as a percentage. So numbers went up, our percentages went up at 74.9% in 22 and 76.6. People identifying as white dropped, and multiple races went up a little bit as well, percentage wise, over those years. There are other races that are counted in the HUD statistics. I did not include them because there were so many and they were like a fraction of a percent. I went with these as the big bullets. So please forgive me in an effort to keep it a little cleaner to help understand the racial breakdowns. This was the big numbers and the big chunks when looking at the equity piece. If we look at our rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing enrollment, rapid rehousing we serve, as you see, Lloyd had talked about earlier, we had fewer rapid rehousing beds available. So we had 267 beds or 267 people served versus 290 in the previous year. Out of that 267 people that were served during 2022 to 2023, only 128 of those people were new, meaning they entered the system between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. So there's over 130 who were carried over from the year before. And this is kind of one of the reasons why we don't see a whole lot of turnover, and it makes it very difficult as people are needing longer time in a rapid rehousing program to resolve. It means fewer slots become available for new people to get that assistance. The bigger piece is permanent supportive housing. Our permanent supportive housing number is a little artificially inflated because it does include our VASH vouchers. So there are a lot of these are VASH vouchers, but when we look at our new enrollments in PSH, there were only 9 slots available. So less than 1 PSH slot a month last year that became available. So we've got a big chronic homeless problem that's growing, and there isn't a turnover or a move on strategy that's being able to move people out of PSH into either less restrictive environments where they have a subsidy but no longer need the supportive services. However, what we're seeing is the older and sicker population in permanent supportive housing, for them to exit really when they're ready to exit a permanent supportive housing program, they need more of a family care home or an assisted living facility. And unfortunately, a good number of folks in permanent supportive housing end up passing away while they're in those programs. Now, if we're looking at our equity in the system, I ran these system reports, and these system reports are based on the longitudinal system analysis data and Stella P that come out of our HUD reports. So this equity data is not going to line up with the data I just showed you exactly, but this is the most recent equity data I can find that I have confidence in our ability to say, yes, this is true and correct. So this is for the federal fiscal year based on our federal reporting to the federal year. So our rapid rehousing, people referred to rapid rehousing, 76% of people referred to rapid rehousing identified as Black, African-American, or African, whereas 73% of the entire homeless system for that period identified as Black or African-American. So we're actually seeing more people identifying as Black or African-American being referred to rapid rehousing than we have in the overall system. So I think that's a good thing. People identifying as white are a little underrepresented as a proportion of the homeless system, and people identifying as multiple races are exactly on par for what their overall population in the homeless system is. We look at permanent supportive housing. No, this is not a typo. I ran the numbers. The percentages were almost identical between rapid rehousing and PSH. So 75% of people in PSH identified as Black or African-American. And that is a little overrepresentative of that population in the entire homeless system. Again, people identifying as white were slightly underrepresented in PSH. And multiple races were essentially statistically flat with their with the overall population. This is the piece where I'm not sure what the answer is to this one. This is the only place where we see a flip in the numbers, and that's with emergency shelter. And people who identify as Black or African American are underrepresented in the emergency shelter system compared to the population of people identifying as Black or African American in the overall homeless system by 4%. So we need to do a little bit of, I was talking to Anthony and talking with our lived experience group to find out what we can do to try and find out why that might be. People identifying as white are slightly overrepresented in the emergency shelter system. Exits. This is, as a system, as the entire homeless system of Durham, the average 33% of people who exit the homeless system in Durham go to permanent housing. This is something that is interesting to me, I think, is people who identified as Black or African American exit above the system average at 37%. So 37% of people who identify as Black are able to exit to permanent housing, whereas the average is 33%. People who identify as white come in under the average. So this says a lot about our homeless system in terms of not just our homeless system, but as a community at large and affirmatively furthering fair housing. These numbers tend to suggest we don't have a landlord discrimination problem based on color. We also can assume that because we do have a slightly higher number of people identifying as Black or African American in rapid rehousing and PSH, there's additional supports and additional resources to help people identifying as Black or African American be able to exit to those permanent housing destinations as well. And people identifying as multiple races are not exiting anywhere close to the average of the system. So we do need to work on that. There you go, Madam Chair. I think I got us done 2 minutes late. Sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you so much, Colin. Ebony, I saw your hand raise and then go down. Just want to make sure if you wanted to add anything or have a question.
I was just curious, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
Colin, I was just curious about like this people's reason for homeless. I saw what you posted, but I was wondering, have you come in contact with any families who are homeless because of the housing scams? That is what I am seeing in school system this year and last year. So I was just curious if you have noticed that in the county.
Because of the housing what?
The housing scam. So it looks like this. A family goes on Zillow and there's a home for rent on Zillow. They reach out to the person to pay the deposit. They pay the deposit. When it's time to move in, someone is already occupying the home, which now causes a family to be homeless.
I have not heard that. That would be a Nicole Lamb and Coordinated Entry would be hearing a lot more of that, and maybe some of the street outreach.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for elevating that, Ebony. I've heard similar stories, including folks now asking for application fees and then just collecting and never picking somebody. So that's unfortunate. Renee?
I was just wondering what the correlation is between the poverty level ethnically in Durham and the homeless, as outlined here.
I have not done any digging in the poverty rates and how that intersects with the homeless population. I can share anecdotally, the households experiencing homelessness are significantly below 30% AMI.
I did hear someone,
It's, Tracy, you got a question?
Yes, as I was listening to your presentation, I also wondered about the data as it relates to those individuals who are living in poverty, and also are the statistics, if I can get this out, the statistics for Durham, city of Durham, does it relate to how other communities of this size and demographic breakout look for, is it comparable? Because I wonder, as we're starting to talk more and more about affordable housing, and also chronic homelessness is being highlighted in larger states like Texas and California and places in the South, where you would think that maybe there are opportunities for more affordable housing, when really that's not always the case in urban centers. I just wondered whether or not Durham was looking at other, communities of comparable size along with the poverty, to see whether or not there were any comparisons to make, or if any of these things are outliers and are very specific to Durham, given the population and demographic makeup. Because Durham is pretty much, isn't it 50% African American and people of color and 50% white?
Roughly.
But but the majority of the makeup of the individuals who are experiencing homelessness or some level of homeless housing insecurity are people of color. And
Correct.
so there are other systems, I'm thinking, that are at play, whether it's the employment workforce system, financial education systems, other systems that are contributing to the overwhelming proportion of people of color that are presented among the housing continuum.
So on the racial breakdown of people of color being overrepresented in the homeless system, that is a fairly standard trend across the country. And that's why HUD is really trying to push homeless systems to really look at the equity lens and saying, hey, are people of color receiving the same treatment, the same benefits, and exiting at the same rate as people who identify as white? And we are looking at that. In terms of the homeless system, we have been focusing on homelessness, literal homelessness. And when you start getting into poverty and really, really low income housing, and we intersect a little bit on a Venn diagram with that, with the people who are at risk of losing housing within 14 days. But there's a whole lot of other people who are not necessarily losing their homes within 14 days, but are living in poverty and just scraping by to keep the roof over their head and food in their stomachs. That is a little bit outside of where we've been as the homeless system. And that sort of gets into other parts of what community development looks at as affordable housing. And there are some reports on that but we have not done a deep dive on how much of that intersects in the homeless system, other than the data we see from those who are experiencing literal homelessness. I hope that helps.
Well, yeah, it does. But when we did the gap analysis, did the gap analysis inform or educate in anything as it relates to those who are experiencing homelessness, or was it a matter of just inventory or lack of services? Was there any correlation between the gaps analysis with some of the data that's being shared around the numbers?
I'd have to go back. Which gaps analysis are you looking at? The one
Wasn't there one just last year that was completed?
There was one that Colleen and the group had done. That was on a very small, specific population. And it would only be true for that particular group.
Okay. So it was a small sampling of individuals who are experiencing homelessness?
It was it was like a subpopulation of a subpopulation.
Oh, okay. I see.
And what we're trying to do is pull ourselves out of looking at subpopulations of subpopulations for gaps analysis, and trying to do what you're suggesting, Tracy, and looking at the big picture and saying, hey, where are we? Where are these huge gaps? And we clearly saw that we're seeing a growing number of people experiencing chronic homelessness in our system, seeking assistance. And we saw that there were only 9 permanent supportive housing beds that became available during this year. Well, we got a big gap. From one year to the next year, the number of people identified as chronically homeless went up, and the number of permanent supportive housing bed opportunities to come into dropped. So that's a very clear need and a huge gap.
That is interesting. And this is my last point. I'll stop talking. But I'm just wondering, in terms of the number of people who were entering into shelters who were single head of household with children, did that impact any of those numbers of individuals that either weren't eligible or did not use that as a source along the continuum?
So help me understand a little bit. So single.
Well, what
head of
I'm
household,
hearing,
like
what
a
I'm
single
hearing
parent with
is,
kids?
yes, I'm hearing that because of some single head of household females that may have more than 2 children, and given the age of those children, sometimes the shelter is not an option for them. And so I'm just wondering whether or not, I thought I saw in one of your slides, the number of people that were either a part of the shelter or weren't utilizing the shelter. And I just wondered whether or not that may have anecdotally been a reason why some families may not be able to access shelters.
Great question. So age of children has nothing to do with people being able to enter shelter. Any shelter will serve any parent with kids of any age, as long as they're 18 and under. You can't come in as a 60-year-old with your 30-year-old and 35-year-old and go to the family side. It's just not set up that way at this point. And we've got the bigger challenge is we only have 30 bedrooms in the entire system for homeless families. There's only 30. That's it. 21 at Families Moving Forward and 9 at Urban Ministries. So anytime we have more than 30 families experiencing homelessness, there isn't going to be a place for them to go until somebody moves out of the shelter, or we can find a place to rapidly rehouse and get people permanently housed. Challenge is renting a 2, 3, 4 bedroom unit for a larger family. It's tricky and it's expensive, and they're often hard to find, especially when you've got multiple evictions, low credit. So families can hang out in the shelter a little bit longer because it just takes longer to find those appropriate housing interventions for them. So that's why we have some more, just the turnover is just not there. There's not a place to exit people to. And the number of, I think you're talking about the number of children that were identified in the system did go up about 10%. That's what I was referring to. Is
yes, I think that was
we are seeing more children. So that's either more families are becoming homeless, which we are definitely seeing across the system. Our point in time count showing it. Our weekly numbers that are coming in from the entry point are also showing we're getting more and more families experiencing homelessness.
Thanks, Colin. And thanks again for this great conversation. For those of you that have stuck with us for an extra 12 minutes. I just want to elevate real quick before we close that what Russ put in the chat around, maybe this is something that could make sense to present a simpler version to county and city council and county commissioners, might be something for us to consider. So just want to elevate that, and perhaps that's something else we can talk at our next exec meeting about. And then also if we can make sure that we send that presentation out to folks, it seems like people were interested in those numbers. So thank you for putting that together. Moving on to our last item, any announcements? And if you haven't signed in, please remember to sign in. I'm seeing that in the chat again. All right, hearing no announcements, just a reminder to look at the bottom of your agenda for the trainings that are required for Durham COC subrecipient trainings, the September 28th and 29th. And then also openings on our committees. This should be available for playback on our YouTube channel, correct, Colin? This meeting? Yes. Okay. All right. Hearing nothing else.
Just a quick question. So are both trainings required to attend both days?
Colin, you're muted.
Yes, the trainings are required. If you can't make the trainings, we will have them posted and you can do quizzes. They definitely need to be done before the end of this calendar year. So if you are able to come tomorrow and Friday, it'll save you having to take a quiz. but we are making both available, and a lot of good stuff in them.
Thanks, Colin.
Okay, thank you.
Can we put the YouTube channel link in the chat as well? And then I will take a motion to adjourn us.
I move, Sharita.
Thanks, Sharita. Have a second?
Renee, second.
Thank you, Renee. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm seeing the YouTube in the chat, so make sure you click that before you head out.